It is my great honor to introduce our lunchtime speaker, Dr. Brad Jacobs. Not only is he one of the best concierge physicians in the world, not only is he a Stanford-trained precision medicine physician, he's also someone that I've known for 30 years. So 30 years ago, we were cute little interns at the University of California, San Francisco. So we were walking around in our little short white coats, taking care of patients, learning how to do that together. 30 years. So 30 years I've known this man, and I want to share a couple of things that he would never say himself. Secrets. How's that sound? So first, he's been doing martial arts since he was a little kid. He has so many black belts that I can't even keep track of them. Second, he is a serious athlete. He loves to surf big waves. He loves to go skiing off-piste. Is that how you say it? He likes to go heli skiing. Check out his Instagram @BradJacobsMD so you can see some of his videos of like doing a quadruple somersault while heli skiing. He was also an endowed chair professor at the University of California, San Francisco. And what I perhaps love most about him is that he has all of those things together with being a shaman. And that's the side that you're going to hear about today. So I'm so delighted to welcome to the stage Dr. Brad Jacobs.
No compromise.
All right, well, welcome. How's the lunch so far? Delicious salmon? Doesn't Dave do an amazing job serving us up amazing food? Let's give it up for him. So we've had an amazing couple days, and today we're going to speak, it's a bit of a pivot on biohacking. And the pivot is about how do we transform who we are, what we want to be, to achieve all the things we hope to have achieved in our life thus far. And with all the biohacking and all the efforting that we do, how do we shift in a way so there's less effort and more joy? And Dave spoke to that on the first day, you may have heard. So today we're going to speak into defining peak experiences, understanding the key features, understanding the neurobiology that happens when we experience peak experiences. We're going to learn this transformation protocol that I've developed that's been really successful for many of my patients. And then I'm hopeful that you guys will create your own action plan. And at the end, there's a QR code you can hit if you'd like, where you can download a worksheet and work that through, because we don't have time today to do that. So welcome to the journey. Let's talk about transformation. Who's interested in transformation? Anyone in the room? All right. Beautiful. And those that aren't, hopefully you'll wake up by the second half and be really interested in the idea. So what are we talking about? A positive shift in consciousness and in our personality. Wouldn't that be a blessing? And what does that mean? Well, first you need to know it's a one-way door. Like, you walk through the door as you're transforming, and it's really a no re-entry option. It can happen gradually for many people, where you have these peak experiences, and then you do some work. You know, you integrate it. You're like, wow, that was intense, that was beautiful, that was horrible, whatever it was, you integrate it over time and having more and more. And for others, for better and worse, it's an epiphany. You know, it's a sudden moment where they're just different humans. Does anyone know anyone that's had that experience? Raise your hand. Yeah. So for me, I'll tell you a bit of a personal story. Sarah was kind enough to mention I've done martial arts since I was a kid. And I can remember being a kid. I moved to a new school. I got bullied. I didn't like that very much. Anyone ever been bullied when you were a kid? Wow, not that many people have been bullied. Really? Let's try that again. Who's been bullied when you were a kid? Okay. Yeah, right? Kids are like, they have no filter, right? So I went and started studying martial arts. I'm like, okay, I have an answer to this problem. And I did that, and I still practice martial arts. But admittedly, as I grow up, you know, in my 20s and 30s, I was quick to anger. You know, if I felt out of control or inadequate, I would move and take control. And I found myself, you know, some aggressive drivers were doing things they shouldn't have been doing. I found myself putting the guy in a chokehold, then having to deal with the police about it. Of course, it turned out the driver was in fault, but nonetheless, what am I doing putting a man in a chokehold? And raising my own child, who now just graduated from high school, I'm delighted to say, last week, yeah, right? She made it through the wormhole, still alive. And I found myself, though, and she's a woman, she is fierce, and she is brilliant, and she's a beautiful being. And when she was a teenager, she was challenging. You know, she was a woman of her own mind, to her credit. But I found myself getting increasingly angry, yelling at her, pounding my fist, really out of control. And it wasn't until the wake-up call came for me when her mother called me out. And that was my journey to really understanding and becoming more authentic of, like, what are the narratives, what are the beliefs, what happened when I was a kid that influence how I behave now, that influence my thoughts, my beliefs, that influence my habits. So I did some deep work. For me, it was gradual, moments of epiphany. You know, my father died when I was 27, he was 52. That's a moment. I had many experiences that included psychedelic medicine, that included my enjoyment for big waves and skiing and doing all the crazy stuff I love to do, that classically are considered flow states. And here I am today, and I firmly believe if we're fortunate enough to live long enough, we get another turn at the wheel to make the changes we want to make in our life. And I'm hopeful with the biohacking that you all love doing, that you can live long enough and make the changes you want to make in your life. So let's talk through how we can get there. What are peak experiences? It was originally coined in the 40s by Maslow. And it's a moment of awe, says the American Psychology Association. Ecstasy, sudden insight into a powerful unity, transcending space, time, and self, and the pursuit of self-actualization. And if you think about that, this is a peak experience that's one of many. So there's many options he put. He actually took 18 people he thought were self-actualized. He included Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and others. And he identified about 18 attributes, and one of them is about peak experiences, and I want to speak into that today. The other I'll mention that Dave mentioned yesterday, I believe it was about play, right? We need more play in our life. We take life too serious, right? Moments of joy. But today, we're going to talk about peak experiences. So here's one. Who's done wingsuit flying? Anybody? Wow. Okay. Right on. I've got one. Anyone else? Well, let me show you what that feels like.
1, 3.
They're going over 200 miles an hour. Crazy, right? So those guys are going over 200 miles an hour. They're going right over the treetops. You guys are crazy. There's a guy who does it over there. All the power to you. I have yet to do that. I don't think it's in my framework right now. It's a bit much for me. But there are many examples, and near-death experiences. So having someone you know that you love die, that can be potent in shifting how you frame the world. That is a peak experience, not a positive one, but one that can be transformative, as well as many others. So as we talked about, right? So people find themselves, what about car accidents, where everything slows down? Have you ever been in a car accident in life? All of a sudden, what took 2 seconds feels like it took 5 minutes. Immersion experiences, and I'll speak to psychedelic medicine today, as well as Hakomi, which is a type of psychotherapy that's not talk therapy. It bypasses our cognitive processes and really focuses on being mindful and being aware of our body and noticing what shows up. So I may come in saying, I had a horrible day, I got in a fight with my partner, I said things I shouldn't have said, I'm super upset, and I behaved horribly, and they're like, okay, so let's drop in and notice where you feel that. And you may notice like, oh, I feel a tightness in my throat, or I'm feeling there's these yellow colors showing up, maybe your eyes are closed. And then you start tracing that flow into that you're noticing in your body, maybe an old memory shows up. I remember when I was a kid, and they tried to quiet me, my dad, and I had to, and that's the journey back into the subconscious, to notice the patterns that set up in our life, that then fast forward, create our beliefs, our thoughts, and our actions, and our habits that we're doing right now. And then flow states. I love flow states. We'll do some today. We'll do a little bit of Tai Chi. So who's seen The Matrix, 1999 Matrix? Amazing. Wasn't that a mind shift? So let's take a look at this version of a journey that may be attuned to a psychedelic medicine experience.
Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me.
That's potent. All right, who in the room is ready to take the red pill? All the power to you. It takes a bit of courage and a bit of ambition, and I think this is the right audience for that experience. So, and I'm hoping you guys can rely on each other as we make the journey together. So admittedly, change is hard. How many of us have had a New Year's resolution? Had okay, this year. So every year for New Year's, I have a journal, and I would write the 5 things I wanted to do that year. So meditation, more meditation. I wanted to learn how to play guitar again. I had my list. And year after year, I'd look at the same things. Does anyone ever have that experience? You sort of fall back off. Why is that? So I've alluded to these unconscious patterns that then create our beliefs and our thoughts. And what we are now understanding is there's a cognitive rigidity that happens, a psychological rigidity that happens. As we start to form belief frameworks, we believe in what we believe. And we have good reason. We have all these previous life experience that informs our current belief, our current framework. And Lord knows with the internet and the echo chambers that happen, it can reinforce all the things that you believe. Because you're looking under the light post where the light is for the key, but it might be down the street. And so change can be hard. And while we desire to change, since we apply these belief frameworks, it actually creates, it's like by definition, creating a contradictory experience where you're rolling a rock up a hill. So how do we revise and change these belief frameworks? And how do we change our habits? And I believe it's a reframing. So I'm pushing the rock up the hill, or am I actually ascending the hill, right? Love this woman who's climbing up this hill, free climbing. So it's really not about your actions. It's not about our actions, although that's what we're all about. Like our goals are about our actions, right? You write down the things you want to do, different. It's really about noticing and healing your subconscious parts that happen from prior life experience that then shape your thoughts, beliefs, habits, and actions. Then it becomes easy. So peak experiences should have a few things in common if you're looking for them. So you want to overwhelm your senses. That guy wingsuit flying was having his senses overwhelmed. You want to actually drop into the present moment. And that's what happens, right? When you overwhelm your senses, if you're in a car accident, if someone close to you dies, if you're doing yoga, there's so many ways to experience this. You drop into that present moment. And at that moment, this belief fixation that we have needs to be sort of relaxed, right? We're trying to relax, suspend our previous viewpoints. And that allows for this psychological and cognitive flexibility. And relaxes our prediction models, because something happens, you already have predicted what's going to happen next, whether you're right or wrong. And that's the catalyst for transformation. So what ends up happening, beautifully, is our core values we start to look at them. We start to maybe change them. We start to reevaluate them. And our ways of being in the world, we start to notice, well, what's coming easy to me? What's the universe delivering to me? We do so much efforting. We start to receive our interactions more. You start to sense more. Your awareness opens more. There's something called the reticular activating system that filters out the thousands of things that are happening right now. So, for example, people walking across the room that I'm noticing, the lights that are on in front of me right now, I'm focused on you guys. I'm filtering out all that. It's too much. But in so doing, I'm filtering in what I want to be focused on, which is what feels comfortable for me. Ultimately, I'm hopeful that you'll start to understand, I should say, and do less figuring, of who you're called to be in this world for this momentary life that we have, however long it lasts, whether you believe in Brian Johnson that we become gods, or you believe actually we may die at some point, and what you feel called and compelled to do. So this is anyone surf in this audience? Any surfers? Okay, yes. So this is a place called Cloud Break. It's in Fiji, and this is my son in a wave I wish I could do just like this. He's 20. The presence that's required, this is a peak experience. And the steps that are required to get into this point, in this position, on this wave, experiencing what he's experiencing, requires a whole process, a whole protocol. And I broke it into 4 steps. So number 1, there's an initiation process where you may get disoriented, where you're pulled into that present moment, where you have potentially ego dissolution. There's a presencing that happens. Then comes insight. That's the part that doesn't always happen with a lot of these. So I may be doing big wave surfing, I may be doing wingsuit flying, I may do yoga every day, but am I bringing that in? Am I absorbing some of the insights? Am I then bringing it into my daily life? And that's the work. That's the gradual approach. So there's subjective themes that happen. And there's a list here that are in each category, and I won't go through them all, but you can see in initiation what's happening. This ego dissolution is an example. In presencing, there's this down-regulation where you become less goal-oriented, and you're bottom-up sensing. You start to use other parts of our sensory system, of our being, to notice things. That conversation he had about intuition, Brian and Dave had yesterday, how many of you were in the room for that conversation with Brian? Not everyone? It was a good conversation. Go watch it when it's ready, when it posts up on YouTube. So that conversation about Brian saying he doesn't trust his intuition, you can learn to hone that intuition. And that intuition is a gut instinct. And as you may know, there's more nerves and there's the larger immune system around your gut than any part of the organs in your body. And then insight, this anomalous phenomenon we call it, where what's happening doesn't quite align with the rules and the scientific theory, how we understand how the world turns. Like, how is it possible I had a dream where I spoke to my grandmother who told me things that I never knew before, and then I talked to my mother and they're true? How did that happen? That doesn't follow the rules that we understand, correct? Or how is it possible that what felt like was a 30-second car accident felt like it actually went on for an hour? How is that possible? And then the habituation, and that's the part, this is the key, is integrating this into our life. And that requires a bit of a structure. So the objective theme's also equally interesting to me as a scientist. And the event occurs, and then you get this, what happens actually in the brain, if you look at the neurobiology, is you get a reduction in the temporoparietal activity in our brain. There's less goal orientation, that means. We're not about execution. We're about sensing. We're about absorbing. We're about considering things. We relax that cognitive and psychological rigidity when that happens. And it allows for more flexibility, and it allows for rewiring of the brain. As these insights come in, we have neuroplasticity. And then, with the right framework, again, you can get this habituation. You can bring it into your life. And that requires you have this peak experience, and then you process it with a therapist, with a friend, with a guide, with yourself, journaling, however it works for you. So I want to give you some data. We are a biohacking conference, after all. So what happens during these different experiences? So if you haven't had a chance, if those that are clinicians and those that are interested, there's a booth downstairs or somewhere around here in the expo zone called Heads Up Health. And I use their platform for my patients and myself. And you can see here, this is me. So as Sarah Gottfried said yesterday, alcohol and HRV. So this is my heart rate variability, the red line, and my morning readiness, the blue lines, over time. And this is the past month. So what does alcohol do to my HRV? That ain't pretty. And that can be 1 or 2 drinks, actually. And you can see I don't do it that often. Now, who's heard of Krishna Das? Anyone? Okay. Look at what happened to my HRV after an evening with Krishna Das. That was amazing. So you can see there on the right-hand side, I was averaging in the 60s and 50s on average. I was hitting over 100 at moments through the evening after that evening with Krishna Das. Costa Rica. Who's been to Costa Rica in the room? Don't we? Pura vida, right? Who loves Costa Rica? Look what happened to my HRV while I was in Costa Rica. It actually went up about 10 points. Really interesting to look at your data. And here's another point which I think is worth knowing. There's a patient who's a 49-year-old woman who had significant trauma when she was a child. She had an overbearing father who was abusive towards her. She had a mother who was a narcissist and in total neglect of her. And so she has huge safety issues. She's enormously successful. She does interior design and architecture for all the people that we know publicly in the world. Not all of them, but many of them. And so she went through an MDMA-assisted psychotherapy experience and has that experience. She's now doing follow-up integration with a therapist and with myself has led to a huge transformation in her life from one MDMA experience. But look what happened to her HRV the night of. See how it plummeted? So why is that? Not everything's pleasant. Not everything is relaxing. So our goals of doing yoga or what it might be for relaxation, we want to get a little bit out of our comfort zone. Sometimes a lot of it under a structured format, and your HRV will drop, and then look how it bounced back up the following day. Higher than her average. So I find biohacking really interesting as a way to sort of look at, oh, I drink alcohol, I feel better for the moment, I didn't really get very many insights. As a matter of fact, what happened that evening, right? and our HIV drops, our physiology changes. Oh, okay, is that bad or good? Well, did it help you? And then I do MDMA, my HIV dropped also, but look what happened after. I'm a transformed being. So I think context is super important when you're biohacking. So anyone heard of this gentleman, Stan Grof? He's actually still alive. He's in his early 90s. This dude in the 1950s in Switzerland was dosing folks in the psychiatric institutes with LSD in the 1950s when it was legal and made by Sandoz, pharmaceutical drug company. And he's an MD, PhD psychiatrist who came to the States and has done amazing work that transfers something called holotropic breathwork. Has anyone heard of holotropic breathwork? He's the founder of that and has done amazing work. And I love his quote, which is the potential and significance of psychedelics is comparable to the value of the microscope for biology and the telescope for astronomy, for the study of our minds. So who in this room has done one of these medicines that's sitting on the screen? Okay, that's a large crowd of happy people, or maybe it wasn't so happy. Who's done it in a way that in the setting like of a ceremony with a guide or a physician or a clinician? Great. Okay, so many of you are familiar with this concept. And I want to speak a bit today about an entheogen, so meaning one that brings more unity. These tend to be ones that we think of as hallucinogenics. Now, MDMA, which is more of a pathogen, which you don't visually see things that are different or aren't there, or heightened colors with MDMA typically. I want to focus on the entheogens, and we're going to talk a bit about something called ayahuasca. But before I go there, I just want you to know, for those that don't know as much about psychedelic medicine, or for those that do but don't really understand the safety profiles, I think it's important to understand where they lie across all the wonderful things that we like to, or sometimes need to, ingest. So this study by Daniel Nett looks at both self-harm and societal harm. And you can see the composite. It's stacked as a column. The far left, alcohol. So I used to work in the emergency room for a while on my nights and weekends, trying to be able to afford to save up to own a home in the Bay Area. And I would see, without fail, half a dozen people related to alcohol abuse. Every shift. Heroin, crack. Look what's on the far end of the LSD, magic mushrooms, ayahuasca had been studied, would be over there, and MDMA. Most people don't like to dose every day on LSD and magic mushrooms in high doses, right? Now, microdosing has become more interesting and fashionable, but actually, just so you know, is not on the transformation pathway. It does different things. It brings you more present, reduces anxiety. But the bigger doses that really goes through the initiation process, no one's going to do that on the regular. And clearly, people just want to be left alone anyway, so it's not like there's much societal harm happening. So let's talk about ayahuasca. This is a case study of 10,000 adults across 50 countries, translated into 5 languages, who looked at 15 insights and life changes. Fascinating study. 10,000 people. So look at insights noted after drinking ayahuasca. Insights into their own personality. Sacredness and a higher power, the sense of unity, the sense that we're all connected, that we're not as separate as we think we are. Insights into my personal and family relations, that everything's connected. Now, what's the proportion of people reporting specific life changes? 90% of these people reported one life change. And on average, 3 life changes. Pretty potent. Changes in, religion potentially, changes in, or rifts. They've had resolving rifts in their family and personal dynamics. This is really potent medicine. And admittedly, it's not like a beautiful, you see the sunrise and everything's glorious for the entire journey. So for those of you that are interested and prepared to drop into this wormhole, to take the red pill, This is, you know, it can be a bumpy ride. And there's many paths to it, and it's not for everyone. So what are some of the, if you think about the protocol I outlined, initiation, first step. Ego dissolution is a big part of that. Meaning that you lose the self-talk, your narrative, the conversations, the parts that are showing up in your mind that are saying things to you right now actually, it's probably happening in your very moment as we're talking. That starts to dissolve. And in so doing, you get this sense of connectedness, this non-duality. And you can see in this study that that drove many of the specific effects, the specific benefits in that initiation process. Presencing, this reduction in temporoparietal activity. Again, you can see quieting or shifting the default mode network. You can see quieting this temporoparietal activity. People are much more at the level of this body awareness coming up, this bottom-up experiencing of what's going on around them. And in so doing, they're starting to relax their narratives, because their narratives are based on historical context, right? On the past, or predicting the future. But when you're in the present moment, everything is new, like a baby with fresh eyes. And also what happens, under the influence of psilocybin, by way of example, look at the change in our brain connectivity. That is insanely curious to me. Look at all that connectivity that's happening. No wonder you're having insights that you never had before. No wonder you're able to reshape your childhood moments in your life that you thought that were so horrendous, or you thought that were maybe even so beautiful. You can open up to a different view of them and understand them in a different way. And that leads to new neural connections, neuroplasticity, rewiring of our brain. When I was growing up, and then when I went to med school, we were told, like, okay, age 20, your brain's fixed. Like, that's it, your wiring's done, it's all downhill from here. Thank God we learned that's not true. And this is a great study that looked at one dose of psilocybin, and they looked at all the different aspects that leads to neuroplasticity, this thing's called brain-derived neurotropic factor, the RNA that then becomes proteins, then changes in these synapses, which is the connecting points of the neurons. And you could see over time this waterfall effect, this cascade from one dose of psilocybin. So how do we bring that into our life? Many of us that have done psychedelics may have done it in a way that was an amazing peak experience, but we haven't had the opportunity to bring it back into our life and incorporate that peak experience. And it sort of wanes, it wears off, it was an amazing moment, and everything sort of folds back to the past, and we go back to our regular life, right? Change is hard. So how do we sustain our changes? How do we get, it's not really getting back to that moment, but it's how do we incorporate that into our mundane daily life, where you got your kids, you got a partner, you got work, you got to get up Monday morning, you're drinking your coffee. How do we do that? And it requires a framework. I believe it requires accountability with friends, with peers, with psychological container, and everyone has their own view of it. I'm a big fan of Hakomi. Go look it up, H-A-K-O-M-I. And for those that are clinicians in this space, they're actually, I'm core faculty of a training that's about to start that is Hakomi-based psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. It starts in August, if you're interested in that. So these peak experiences within the context of a framework that requires some follow-up. Now, how many of you are familiar with MDMA? Okay. How many know that MDMA will be legalized by the FDA probably by the fall of this year? The current date is August 9th. Yeah. So it's been fast-tracked using the HIV medicine protocols that were developed in the late 80s and early 90s for fast-tracking breakthrough therapies. This is considered a breakthrough therapy for those suffering from PTSD. There's 24 veterans a day that commit suicide, military veterans, a day. 24. So this is considered breakthrough therapy. Why? Because the results are profound. They've never seen a medicine behave this way, ever. So this randomized controlled clinical trial was a phase 3 study, and they showed people with multiple suicide attempts with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, not all military, a mix of people, Multiple years of therapy, years of medication. Who knows what the chances of having resolution of your PTSD is with full board conventional therapy, which is medications that are currently approved and years of psychotherapy? Anyone know? Any guesses? 30%. So effectively, the placebo effect is thought to be 30%, and it's 30%. So decade of psychotherapy, decade of a pill every day, or multiple pills every day, high risk of morbidity for those that are around them, and suicidality, 30% chance. 80% of the folks had resolved their PTSD at the end of 3 months with this medicine. And the way it's dosed, rather than daily, is they received MDMA. They then did 3 sessions of psychotherapy. This is sort of and the version of psychotherapy is a Hakomi style psychotherapy. It's not a lot, it's some talking, but it's how I described before. It's really holding space for our own self-healing process and our own self-insights to show up at the subconscious level that I've been talking about. Not talk, 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 talk. That's our ego talking. And we've already thought about it 1,000 times. And in my view, as the therapist across the room, it's a pretty tall order to ask them to give you the insight when you've thought about it 1,000 times already. And this room's a pretty smart group of people. So this is a different framework. They did it 3 times, MDMA on 3 occasions, each time with 3 sessions of psychotherapy. And then they were done. That was it. You're done. Not on the daily. As you can imagine, pharmaceutical drug companies aren't super happy about this new idea. So what's really fascinating is from 3 months to 12 months, the data gets better and better. Why do you think that is? Why are people getting better when they're done with their medicine? The neuroplasticity I was describing. So, this is the main road, and someone has broke trail on it. Someone's going to go break trail that way. And then that felt really good over there. There was a great sunrise over there. Let's go back. Let's go back. And next thing you know, the water starts being directed that direction. And so over time, it gets better and better, up to 80% benefit. So we have a few minutes left, and I wanted to get us up for a moment, if we can all stand up. And I'd like us to move our body a little bit. So we'll do a brief Tai Chi experience. Sarah had mentioned that I've done martial arts since I was a kid, and so I just want to give you a small taste. So we'll do something very simple called silk reeling practice, which is simply, we're going to move our arms like this. So we'll do one arm to start. And then notice your breathing. And maybe match your movement with your breathing. So you can exhale as the arm's going away from you. You can inhale as the arm's coming back towards you. And just practice that. Exhaling, inhaling. And then we'll try the other arm. So now we got them both going. And ideally, they sort of end like this. They're both palms up, palms down. They sort of end up in the middle together. Palm down, palm up. And then notice your breathing. And then if you want to play around, you can stand on one foot if you want. You can come down to what we call a horse stance. And just notice how you feel. So this is an example of presencing. There's so much happening right now. My breath, my hands. I feel energy and warmth coming out of my hands now. And the slower I go, the more energy I feel. If you ever see guys doing this in the park, you're like, look at those guys. That's not very, what are those guys doing? You don't realize they're shaking, because they're sitting here and there's this both isometric and eccentric movements happening. So we're running close on time, so we come back up, and I'm just going to close us there. But if you're interested in that sort of movement, this presencing as a way to bring you, as an initiation of doing Tai Chi as a peak experience, a presencing, and then what insights do you notice, and then what happens after that. And I'll leave you with a few prompts that might entice you to think about what do I do next? So here's some prompts I'd like you to take home with you, and you can jot them down or take a picture of them. What ways of being in the world come with ease and provide you joy? What are your natural gifts? What ways of being in the world give you energy, which typically are the ones that come with ease and bring you joy? And what does the universe seem to be offering you? What's coming towards you rather than us reaching all the time? And then you could start to entertain the ideas of who do I feel called to be? What do I feel called to do? And I'll leave you with the option, if you're interested, to create your own transformation action plan and how to get started on this protocol that can align with your core values, to use an evidence-based strategy for accountability and partnership and engagement. And I really encourage you to find someone in this room, because they're experiencing this conference with you. They can relate. You can share dialogue. There's common terms you can relate to. Or friends, loved ones at home, to hold you accountable, to do it together. And if you take a picture and take this QR code, it'll take you to my website where you can get a PDF that has a worksheet for you that will teach you the what, the how, what I call the what, the how, and the stick framework. Really to how to, like, what is it that you want to focus on? How is it that you want to do it? And how are you going to stick to it? How are you going to keep that going? What are some of the rewards you're going to give yourself? What kind of curveballs can you anticipate? And then from that, then you go and choose, okay, what are the peak experiences I'm going to go for now that I know what it is I want to focus on? Now that I've sent my attention on what means something to me. And you'll iterate. You'll find yourself iterating. Like at one point, you set your attention on this, and now you're realizing this is even more important, and you start to weave back in time to weave back forward and create a new future for yourself. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to talking to you soon.